Yes, Paul had dotted all of his I's and he had crossed all of his T's as far as religious observance was concerned. But when it got right down to it, that just wasn't enough. Paul confesses in Romans 7:7-13 that he was doing all of the right things, but he himself was anything but all right. In fact, Paul says that there was something in him, in his members, in his flesh, that actually took advantage of his knowledge of God's law. The knowledge of God's will, God's way, God's law actually created an atmosphere and an opportunity for sin to step in and focus on the desires of the flesh. Paul says, I would not have known what it is to covet if the law had not said, ye shall not covet. It's as if you put a jar of your child's favorite cookies on top of the refrigerator and told them, now don't you touch those cookies on top of the fridge. They probably wouldn't have even known that the cookies were up there if you hadn't brought it up. But now that child will climb the cabinets, the chairs, get a step ladder, whatever it takes in order to get at those cookies. So Paul, under the law, was a lot like some of us, my brothers and my sisters. We claim to be under grace, but we act like we're better than everybody else because of the things we do on the outside. We know the scriptures, we've got the church covenant memorized, we know Hiscox, Robert's Rules of Order, and every bylaw of Baptist polity. We are in church every Sunday, we're in Sunday school every Sunday, we're at prayer meeting and Bible study every Wednesday night. We sing on the choir and we attend all of our conferences and conventions. We tithe our money. We don't smoke, we don't drink, we don't chew, and we don't date people that do. We've got it going on the outside. But we are mean-spirited, quick-tempered, foul-mouthed, hateful, unforgiving, critical, sullen, and stubborn. We think we are the ones most zealous for the faith. We think we're the only ones who are doing what is right, know what is right. We're the only ones who are truly defending the faith. No one else has a clue what's going on. And if they do anything that appears right, they've got the wrong motive for doing it. Like Saul of Tarsus, we are sincerely believing that we're doing the Lord's work. We know how it's supposed to be in God's house, and we know how it's supposed to be done. But like Saul of Tarsus, we often find that sin takes advantage of our zeal for the law of God and actually brings out the worst in us. And so like Saul of Tarsus, we reach the point of conversion and enlightenment. We have a Damascus Road experience and encounter the resurrected Christ in all of his glory. We receive the Holy Spirit and we begin with a new understanding of the grace of God. But according to Romans 7:14-25, our situation under grace is very similar to our behavior under the law. And we, like Paul, are mystified by our own actions. Verse 15 says, I do not understand my own actions, for I do not do what I want, but I do the very thing that I hate. I hate being talked about, but I talk about everybody. I hate when folk can't get along, but I can't get along with anybody. I hate when folk don't do what's right, but I won't pray for them. I hate when folk don't love folk, but I can't stand certain Negroes. I hate that the church is cold, dried up, dying, and I won't reach out to folk in the community, but I'm not going to demonstrate any joy. I'm not going to come up with a plan, an idea, or an initiative. I would rather criticize than strategize. I hate these things, but I do the very thing that I hate. What's wrong with me? Why can't I get it together, says Paul. When I was a Pharisee, a rule keeper, a legalist, I did all the right things, but I just kept right on sinning. I was clean on the outside, but I was filthy on the inside. When I experienced grace, I wanted to do the right thing. But I discovered that the good thing I wanted to do, I didn't do it. And the bad thing that I didn't want to do, that's exactly what I did. I discover a law, a principle then within me, in my flesh, in my Adamic nature, which still exists alongside my sanctified spirit, that when I would do good, evil is present. I have to confess that I'm a wretched man. I have to confess that I'm a mess. I'm a worm, a wretch, a self-contained contradiction of sinner and saint, all rolled up in one disturbed package. And the worst part of it is I can't blame anybody but me. I want to play a game of pass the buck like Adam and Eve did in the Garden of Eden. I don't want to confess with Jonah that it's because of me. I don't want to confess with David, I know my transgressions and my sin is ever before me. Against you and you alone have I sinned and done what is evil in your sight. I want to blame the government. I want to blame my parents for not bringing me up right. I want to blame my ethnicity, my gender, my education, or my lack thereof. I want to blame my socioeconomic status. I want to blame the conservatives or the liberals, the Republicans or the Democrats, the foreigners and the immigrants. We want to blame the Muslims or the atheists. I want to blame white people. I want to blame black folk. I want to blame where I live, my husband or my spouse, or even the church for my mean disposition and my unhappy attitude. And sometimes, in fact many times, my brothers and sisters, when we know to do good, when we want to do good, but we fail to do good, think good, talk good, or feel good, we want to cop some Flip Wilson theology and claim the devil made me do it. But the truth is, I can do bad all by myself. Now I realize that Satan is a powerful foe. He is far older than we are. He is far stronger than we are. And yet my Bible tells me that greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world, even if he is the God of this world for the time being. For all of his clever schemes, for all of his demonic servants, for all of his human servants, the devil is already a defeated foe. And let's face it, the devil is not omnipotent either, and neither you nor me is really important enough in the overall scheme of things to warrant the devil's special attention. The plain truth is we are responsible for the majority of our mess. Oh, I'm sure that the devil is pleased by our foolishness, especially when it happens in the church or in the Christian home. But let's be truthful about it. We're quite capable of making an absolute mess of our own lives, our family's lives, and church life all by ourselves. I know nobody out there is comfortable with that, so don't take my word for it. Let's look at what the Bible has to say about it. In Jeremiah chapter 17 and verse 9, the prophet records the very words of God himself. And he says, according to the Amplified Bible, the heart is deceitful above all things, and it is exceedingly perverse and corrupt and severely mortally sick. Who can know it, perceive, understand, or be acquainted with his own heart and mind? Then the psalmist writes in Psalm 51 and verse 5, indeed I was born guilty, a sinner, when my mother conceived me. And in the New Testament, in James chapter 1, verse 14 through 16, but one is tempted by one's own desire, being lured and enticed by it. Then, when that desire has conceived, it gives birth to death. It gives birth to sin, and that sin, when it is fully grown, gives birth to death. Do not be deceived, my beloved. Now, if you don't believe the prophet and the psalmist and the Lord's brother, then listen to Jesus himself. In Matthew 15, 19 through 20, Jesus says, for out of the heart come evil intentions, murder, adultery, fornication, theft, false witness, slander. These are what defile a person. So, my brothers and sisters, the consistent witness of the Bible is that when it comes to sin, we can do bad all by ourselves. There is a devil, yes. We struggle against the world, the flesh, and the devil. We are assaulted by a world system designed to appeal to our carnality, our sensuality, our selfishness, our greed, and our own evil hearts. And when Paul reminds us that our struggle is not against flesh and blood, he's talking about other people not being our true enemy. And when he goes on to say that our struggle is against the rulers, the principalities and powers of this darkness, and the spiritual forces of evil in heavenly places. Paul is reminding us of the external and systemic forces of evil that are at work in the present world system.